Welcome back to the HawksZone Rundown. I'm Ryan. That's Bryce. We just had a great conversation with Dayna O'Gorman. She is a member of Our Turf Football Podcast and Pro Football Writers of America. She came on the show and we discussed a lot of topics tonight. We talked about what's the future of John Schneider's job, the offense as a whole, Ryan Grubb, will he be here as late as next week? The quarterback situation, what's the future there? We get into all of that with Dayna O'Gorman. So check it out on the other side of the HawksZone Rundown.
Well, I'm the best corner in the game.
For this run. Get off me.
DK.
Yes, sir.
Hey, it's John Schneider with the Seattle Seahawks.
And Washington's got a lead. Leo Wilson Geno Smith and Jimbo. The Seahawks are going to hold the NFC Championship.
Every year, you're going to know, is it going to be another 9 and 8?
Players who've got to finish something.
They have to fix the offense.
Part of his success and part of
ambition of being the LOB
Want to hear? That's trading DK Metcalf.
Trade him aggressive.
This is the HawksZone Rundown with Ryan and Bryce.
Back with us again is Dayna O'Gorman. We love having Dayna on. She has a podcast, Our Turf Football. Guys, go check that out. And also Pro Football Writers of America. Dayna, we appreciate you coming on, chopping up Hawks again with us. Just been a wild year. Controlled our own destiny there for a little while, and then we just fell off at the end here. And we're going home this year. No playoffs, but appreciate you coming on. Why don't you? We'll kick it off here. Why don't you give us your assessment of just the overall year 2024 with this Seahawks team? Mike Macdonald's first year, new regime, all of it. Last time we had you on, we were all hyped up. Well, it was just before the Atlanta game, and I think I was like, hey, get ready for an offensive explosion. It happened. Everyone was excited. Kind of that middle of that roller coaster. But here we are now. What's your overall assessment? One game left, but we're out. How do you look at the season?
Well, I think I remember I told you guys that at the beginning of the season, I had a lot of questions about Mike Macdonald. I wasn't sure how I felt about that hire. I was not as raw behind it as everyone else was. I really thought there was some questions. And if you look at the entire season, I still have questions, but they're different questions now. I am much more comfortable with him in a head coaching role, because before we hadn't seen before, right? So I didn't know what to expect. Now, if I look throughout the year, I went back before the Real Hawk Talk show last night, and I watched a whole bunch of press conferences going clear back to like the first preseason game all the way through. And that is a different guy than he was. He's not near as cheerful and his, I don't want to say positive, because he's still very positive. He's very positive about the players. He seems to be, positive about the direction that the team is going, definitely about the way the defense is going. He seems a little more hardened, which sadly happens to NFL coaches, I think, after their first year. I do still have some questions about him. The defense, beautiful. I don't think we could have asked for, of course you could get more, but the progression of the defense has been, perfect, and what we expected. And I think that's been great, which makes me happy being a defense lover. But the offense, there's a lot of question marks. And I know we're going to talk about that in depth. And so I'm going to let that be for now. But my questions when it comes to Mike Macdonald, sorry. I know he doesn't like go by Mike Mack. He doesn't like that one either. I still haven't got a nickname for him. I've got to work.
I like Michael Macdonald.
Yeah. Well, but then I think he's like an 80-year-old singer, right? We don't want to do that either. But the thing of it is that I believe in his vision. I get what he's trying to do defensively. No clue what he's trying to do offensively. If anything, that was not his focus this year. My questions that I still have about him is how he commands a locker room. This team seems to be this year, in my opinion, missing some fire, missing a spark, missing an attitude. And maybe that's just because we're still looking for that old Legion of Boom fire, that whole Richard Sherman attitude. I don't know that that's it. I just don't get much of a spark from him. granted, that might not be him. That might not be his personality. He might not be the person for that. But I still curious about how he commands the locker room. We might not know that for a few years. So I'm just going to kind of hold off on that. But as a whole, as up and down as this season was, as roller coaster, I think you guys called it, as this season has been, I think that there's enough good there to be positive going forward. I think it was more of a rebuild or a retool or whatever it is you want to call it than we thought it may be. And I think this upcoming draft, which I think we're going to talk about too, is going to play a big hand in that. But I think there's enough good there to be somewhat encouraged as a fan going forward.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I look at it. We were talking about it. You talked about the defense. You love the direction of the defense, the personality or the attitude. Yeah, I mean the personality. You look at it like we're not going to have Pete Carroll. So you're not going to have this raw guy. He seems very analytical, and like you said, a guy like that who maybe doesn't show much. That locker room, it's going to take a while for you to really kind of see how he controls that locker room or just gets as much out as he can from that locker room and stuff like that. But I guess when you look at it and you talk about what fans, the direction of the team, I look at this and, there's going to be differences of opinions, but when the Russell trade happened, now going over 3 years here, and I didn't think we'd be in a spot where potentially we could finish 3 years in a row, 9-8. And I think for a lot of fans, we're stuck in the middle. And then especially when it comes to draft time, we're going to talk about the draft and stuff like that. You talk about last draft when there were 6 quarterbacks taken before we took our guy. And we didn't have a shot because where we were picking, because we were just good enough, but not bad enough. And we're kind of stuck and we're there again. We're going to pick in the same spot again, pretty much, right? Determine if we win next week or not. So, what is that plan offensively? You touched on the offense. There's 3 factors that Bryce and I have talked about. There is John Schneider, Ryan Grubb, and Geno Smith. Those are your kind of 3 focal points. And Bryce and I kind of talked about, we kind of broke it down, said, okay, if you had a percentage to say it's so much on this guy, so much on this guy, so much on this guy, who would it be on? And both of us agreed that most of it was on Schneider. That the way the lack of offensive line focus, but there was a percentage on Geno Smith. I guess I'll ask you this: what's the plan offensively that you think John's going to go with now coming into this offseason with the quarterback situation? You look at Geno Smith. And, a good quarterback, not a great quarterback. A lot of, people can say, well, the offensive line or the receivers aren't running proper routes. At this point, he's had 3 seasons as a starter, and he's kind of regressed a little bit. He's about 500 quarterback after that Munich game. What do you see the plan there for the offense with Geno Smith? Is there going to be a plan at quarterback?
Gosh, that is kind of the $1 million question, isn't that this year? And this fan base is really divided when it comes to Geno Smith. I think it's very divided when it comes to Geno. Here's my thing. If you look at the 3 issues there, you brought up Schneider, Grubb, and Geno. I think you guys are absolutely right. The bulk of this lays at the feet of John Schneider. He's the general manager. It is his job to fix these glaring issues. Now, what we see as glaring issues, apparently he does not see as the same type of glaring issues. But I think that he would pay a lot of money to take that one comment back from last year about the offensive line. But what's interesting to me is that I don't lay a lot of the blame at Geno's feet. And it's not because I'm some big Geno lover. I like Geno. I think he's done a good job for what he's had in front of him. Literally in the offensive line, what he's had in front of him. I think that he's done somewhat of a good job. Definitely better than others would have. Definitely not as good as others, right? We know those 2. But I think that if you look back at the draft class last year, those quarterbacks, been some hit and misses, obviously a couple really good hits with Daniels and probably Bo Nix, I would say, were the 2 best. there was just no way in hell Seattle was getting those quarterbacks. There's no way those teams that got them were going to back away from getting those quarterbacks. So it's hard to even say that he could have done anything different to get better at that position last year. You look at his draft the year before, though, you have Witherspoon, you have JSN, nailed it, right? It's so good. And so he's really hard to give a grade draft-wise, except for when it comes to the O-line. We can definitely give him a grade for that one. But my biggest issue seems to be, in my opinion, is that there are certain things that get blamed on Geno that Geno is not really his fault. Now, should he be able to adjust to some of those things better than he does? Yeah, he absolutely should. I'm not saying he's without blame in any way, shape, or form. He definitely has some issues there. But if it were me, and I am looking at going forward the next season, the number one thing that you have to decide is Grubb staying or going? Because if Grubb is staying, then we have a massive changes that have to be made on offense to fit whatever it is he's trying to do, which I don't think a lot of people really know what he's trying to do. If he's going to go, I think you don't have to. It might be smarter to hold on to Geno because then that's a true evaluation. We've had a couple of years. This year seemed to be an offensive disaster for lots of reasons. So I think that you have to make that decision first. Are we getting rid of a quarterback? Or are we getting rid of the OC? Because I don't know that you want to do both. You also have to look at this year's draft class for quarterbacks. Right? Maybe you want to hold on to someone for one more year until next year's draft class. So then when you do that, you have to look at what's out there available. Do you take a chance and you go after one of the mid-level guys? You go after some of the backups that are out there. We don't want Daniel Jones, but any of the other ones, maybe you can go look at. Do you, I said this last night, do you sell the farm for the cow and you give away a whole bunch of picks to go get JJ McCarthy? I don't think that the Vikings are going to do that. I just don't think that that's going to happen. They'd be stupid to be quite honest with you. So I don't know if there's a lot of options out there at quarterback that would make sense financially, schematic wise, or any of that with what we have right now. And if not, then you have to make a change at OC.
Wow, Dana. Okay, so you took a lot of what I was going to say there.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's all good. So for me this year with Geno, I was kind of I'd go kind of like, say Geno was a hill, and you're either going to plant your flag on Team Geno or you're going to, as Seahawks fan base, be off Team Geno's hill and over somewhere else in no man's land. I kept flirting. I'd go about halfway up and I'd come back down, and I'd go up a little farther and I'd come back down. And for me, what changed was I started watching just the way games were going, the flow of the game, the way the calls were coming in from Grubb and the offense and the O-line and what they were being asked to do. And I went back and watched some of the Waldron stuff when we had Waldron here. And I started charting some stuff, and then Robert Mays actually posted it himself on Thursday Night Football. And Geno, like you said, he's not in a top 5 quarterback. And I think that's the one thing people have to understand. You're not going to find a top 5 quarterback. They don't grow on trees. Like John Schneider's old analogy, linemen don't grow on trees. Neither does Josh Allen. And so when we talk about that pie and that percentage pie from John Schneider to Ryan Grubb to Geno Smith, I have been extremely frustrated since the trade with Russell Wilson that John Schneider has not even taken a nibble out of the pie on quarterbacking and finding a solution.
Yeah.
And so, like, for me, I said it when I was talking with Dan Viens on his show, is Geno was in theory supposed to be the bridge. He was okay. We have our bridge guy and we're going to move. So I walk out on Geno Smith bridge, and I get halfway because that's how far he's supposed to go. And then there's supposed to be something else that connects from the halfway point of that bridge to the other island. Currently, I'm standing there 3 years later, and it's an abyss. There's nothing there. Sam Howell is not the answer. He was on a little life raft that went floating by. But that's the problem I have here is he's never presented the other side of that bridge to us from Geno. And he keeps saying, and it's just become basically like this white ghost fairy tale of, oh, I come from Green Bay and I want to draft quarterbacks. And I get that some of them haven't been there. Like last year, all the good quarterbacks went. Bo Nix, Penix, they all left. Did you have the firepower to potentially move up for a Bryce Young? You weren't going to get CJ Stroud, even though I really wanted him. The Texans were sold on him.
Yep.
Could you have flopped and gone up potentially ahead of the Colts and got somebody. But it's not like I'm asking you to get someone to start right away, plug and play. Get someone in here to learn and to grow and has upside. And with the Geno blame, I went and watched him at the Minnesota game. And everyone at that point had started talking about Sam Darnold. Oh, do we go and throw a bunch of money at Sam Darnold because he could be potentially on the free agent market? One glaring thing came out to me, or two glaring things came out to me in that game. Sam Darnold and Geno Smith are the same quarterback, just 10 years in age difference in a lot of ways. Strong arm, had high draft stock when they came out, crumbled in New York when they didn't have things. The only difference now, Sam Darnold has an elite NFL play caller in Kevin O'Connell, and he has an above-average offensive line.
Yep.
That's it. He's got weapons. He's got a Justin Jefferson, Jalen Addison. I'm taking Jackson Smith and Jigba over Addison. And I get DK's not Justin Jefferson, but he's still a top 15 NFL receiver as a weapon. You have running backs behind you like they have Aaron Jones. So it's not a situation of skill position comparison. It's elite NFL play caller, average to above offensive line. That's what was the difference in that game was Aaron Jones would run for 4 yards. They'd stay consistent. They'd run play action. They'd do a bunch of these things. So then when I go to that pie chart, I go, okay, John Schneider, you have failed at drafting O-line. You've failed at developing in the pro personnel development area. You have utterly failed pre-Geno Smith. You failed with Russell Wilson. The only exception was Russell was really good at putting lipstick on a pig because of his legs. He could get you out of trouble. And that was the one thing that was your saving grace. And as we saw Russell's legs deteriorate, oh, now the O-line's this big problem. Now we can't do this. Now we can't do that. And it all kind of came to fruition with Geno being a pocket passer. Wow, we really have an O-line problem. Well, the O-line problem's been there since like 2014, 2015. We just had a
Bruno Giacomini left and we never recovered. No,
exactly, right? And so then when I looked at some of the numbers, like, okay, so you have a bad offensive line, you've got a play caller, and the thing that kind of worries me about Grubb, you're 29th in RB carries, you're 31st in play action rate, you're 32nd in quick pressures allowed, and you're first in shotgun rate, and you have a bottom 3 O-line. You can't, and then when he made his comments today, when he was questioned about what have you learned from week 1 to now, and his comment was, and I have it here, and it blew my mind because it was like, you clearly don't grasp what your job is then as a play caller, because he comes out and says, you know, what have you changed? What have you learned and grown from since week 1 to now? He said, Grubb said, I haven't really changed, but grown in terms of understanding different ways to attack certain defensive families. He talked about attacking scheme and structure, not people. What are you doing as an offensive coordinator? Like, you can't build a whole game plan about, I'm going to go and attack Sauce Gardner. And if that's the case, who are you attacking on the Chicago Bears defense that, 6 points was what you kind of came up with in your infinite wisdom of this is who I'm going to attack? Like, that to me is such a college coach mentality, because you can attack players in college because you have such an age gap and talent gap at that point. And we're talking about an offensive coordinator that had 2 first-round picks in his offense last year in Penix and Odunze. I think a 3rd or 2nd round pick in Jalen McMillan, another 3rd or 2nd round pick in Jalen Polk, and a top 5 or the top O-line in college football. The thing is the one guy that didn't get drafted high and had a 1,200-yard year was Dylan Johnson as running back. Now, is that because Dylan Johnson was a byproduct of the pass offense? And that's what worries me is I'm off Grubb. I was really excited when he got hired. I think we had you on. I said, this is going to be interesting. He's innovative. It's different. I am so far off of him. I don't want to ever get back on the Grubb train at the NFL level. I think he's great at college. I don't think he's an NFL coach. I think that's come through in a lot of ways with his lack of adjustment over the last couple weeks and not helping your quarterback out. Like, as much as we had our issues with Shane Waldron, the dude understood how to run play action. And Geno is a killer off of play action. It's so frustrating to me to hear a coach say that at this point in the year when you are advocating for your job to be like, well, I haven't really changed, but this is the small little thing. That is a massive thing that you just let out that you didn't understand coming into the job. So I think for the quarterback plan, though, Dayna, I think my plan, you keep Geno, you maybe extend him for like on a year-to-year basis kind of a thing, like do a 2-year deal and you extend him out kind of a thing. But you have to, and John Schneider has to this offseason address it because Sam Howell isn't the guy. And I would be okay. And one guy that I really like in this class and could fall to Seattle and be a guy that you could bring in and have a year or two behind Geno, at least give me that other side of that bridge, is a guy like Jackson Dart out of Ole Miss.
Okay.
He's athletic. He can do
I
it.
don't think I've watched him much. Yeah.
So last night they played their bowl game against
Last
number
night,
15 ranked Duke team's defense. And he absolutely shredded the defense. He's a 4-year starter. He came out of USC, transferred to Ole Miss, so he's been around NFL, coaches with Lane Kiffin, even though Lane Kiffin's his own animal in his own right. But he's a guy that needs a little bit of refinement and development, but he possesses a lot of the same skills as Geno, but you're resetting it with a 22-year-old quarterback.
I think then the question, though, that brings up is who's going to teach him? Who's going to get him ready? There is not a quarterback whisperer on this team. There is not. There just isn't. And so I don't know. While I love the idea of bringing in a player and say, and Lisa over on our turf, she's a big, if you're drafted in the first round, you're a starter. That means you start. And anyone else can sit. But if you are drafted in the first round, and I'm like, well, some of these quarterbacks would do a good job sitting for a year. And she absolutely is adamant that that's not how it is. But I'm okay with sitting a quarterback, for a year, even 2. We've seen it work out. Look, it worked pretty well for Patrick Mahomes. It worked pretty well for Love, right? Like you can see it happen. But you have to have someone on the team that can actually bring a quarterback along. And I don't think we have that. I'm not a UW person. I know that most Seahawks fans are, and I didn't really watch it. I watched their national championship game. Like I didn't watch a ton of them. So I didn't know Grubb very well, but everyone was so excited. And do you guys remember during training camp, they were going on and on about how innovative the offense was going to be and blah, blah, blah. And it's just a dud. It just is a dud. It doesn't fit in the NFL. I don't know that it will fit in the NFL. I this morning or this afternoon on Sirius XM NFL radio, I was listening to Moving the Chains. And I really like that show. I think that they're pretty, I don't know, they're pretty pro Seattle a lot of times, but they were talking about Ryan Grubb and they're like, oh, it's his first year. Give him another try. No, this team doesn't have time to give someone another try. They have a pretty good talent level on defense. They have a wide receiver room, which is going to be in flux if some things aren't taken care of pretty quickly. Grubb is not that guy. You have to find someone who can develop the offense, but most importantly, develop a quarterback.
Yeah, I mean, and this is the NFL. Like Grubb's getting paid a couple $1 million a year here. Not to get his feet wet and try it out. I mean, anybody can do that, right? I mean, give me $2 million. I'll get my feet wet. And I mean, seriously, like that's the thing about this. And I think, and that's my thing too with Geno Smith. And I'm not saying, again, I'm not a Geno hater or any of that. Like I like him. He's a good quarterback, but to me, this should have been his limit. It should have been a 3-year max. And that's what we all thought. I mean, this guy was riding our bench for a long period of time and nobody batted an eye at that. You weren't like, hey, he's going to be the next guy when Russell moves on. It just happened. So I don't really buy, like, I think some fans are worried, like if we let Geno go, we're going to be horrible. And I don't really buy that at all. I think he is replaceable. I think because he's an average quarterback that is going to get you 8 or 9 wins. The problem is he's not a bad quarterback, and this is where we're at. I mean, to me, you look at it. I mean, he was second league in interceptions. You can pick it apart all you want, but he was second in picks. The red zone was atrocious, and yes, part of it's Grubb, but part of it's Geno. Like his decision making this year, a lot of times. I mean, don't tell me we weren't all sitting there and be like, "What are you throwing to?" That
hero ball is what we call that. Trying to
part of and he does play it, and you can say, well, he feels like he's got to play hero ball, but again, the moment's too big for him. When you look at it, we didn't really beat a winning team this year at all. You can say the Broncos, but there was Bo Nix in our house his first game of his career.
Thank God we got that game first because that made me so happy.
And that's what I'm saying. So again, you can look at it both sides. For me, and like you said, okay, if he's not the QB whisperer for the next guy, then what is the benefit when you really look at it? Because if you really had a guy, you talk about Jordan Love, and I love Jordan Love, and I love the fact how the Packers have done it. But he sat beside, and maybe you can say all you want, did Aaron teach him, but he's sitting behind a Hall of Famer, right? And whether you like Aaron Rodgers personally or not, he was sitting behind a Hall of Fame quarterback, just like Aaron sat behind a Hall of Fame quarterback. So for me, I kind of look at it differently. I just think, people that were hanging on to Geno Smith for what? I mean, I don't think the only way, and Bryce and I have talked about this, if you're John Schneider, and we'll move off Geno a little bit, because the reason I do think he will be back is because I think, and a lot of people do think that John is safe this year. He is safe, but this offseason is going to be big for him. And if he has another season like this where you miss the playoffs and you're sort of 9-8 or whatever, there's a chance where he might not be around. So if he goes completely off the rails and says, I'm cutting, Geno's off the books, here's Zach Wilson, we'll see what happens, and then he can do other things. He can improve the offensive line, but now to me, John's going to do a little safer road to the quarterback position. I think it's just a weird situation we're in. I feel like we're just, all these things are tied in together, whether it's John Schneider's job on the line, the offensive play calling's atrocious, but that's how I look at the situation. What's your take on that with Schneider? Do you think like he's safe for this year, but do you think he potentially could, do you think management and ownership is saying, listen, we got to be better than this? We talk about, people scream about how season ticket holders are giving away their tickets or selling to, the product's not good at home, right? I don't blame anybody for selling their tickets, especially for the premium prices you can get. If I'm a season ticket holder, I mean, if you're going to 8 games a year, even though I'm getting a good deal on season tickets, I still got it. Maybe I'm driving in the game, I'm paying for parking, beers are stupid, food's stupid. It's costing me money every single time. So that's all good, and I'll do it if the product's good. But if we're getting whooped by any good team that comes in our house, if you're ownership, you have to see that now, and you got to say, listen, something's got to change, John. So what's your take? Is this the most important offseason for John Schneider? And do you potentially, is his job on the line?
Well, there's a lot of facets to those things. So first of all, I think his job has been on the line this whole season and next year. I think I will say I don't expect him to be fired this year, but I didn't think Pete was going to get fired last year. So you never know, like something happens. True. And the caveat to all that is we have Jody Allen,
right,
who technically is supposed to be selling the team. And so, but we've heard nothing about that. Although I know that now the legalese of it is changing some. And so she might need to do that now. But the interesting thing so you have Jody who's going to sell a team, or are you going to change the GM right before you change an owner, or do you wait and change so then there's all these levels to it, right? And if people who say none of that matters don't understand the office side of football, right? Because it all matters. But if you just even take ownership was mad enough last year to get rid of Pete. And I think that what happened was John Schneider, I don't know this for sure. I just my gut. John Schneider said, okay, so let's get rid of Pete and let me show you what I can find. He found a new head coach. He did. He found a really good new head coach that seems to have some good upside, right? The rest of it has not been gone as well. So what do you say? Well, no, I need a full offseason. We need to get rid of it. So there's always these caveats that seem to keep his job. I don't think he's going to get away with it more than one more year. I agree with you at that point, because it's same shit, different day, right? Excuse my language, but it just is. It's like it's not anything different. That's not, McDonald's fault. That goes way back. This goes 5 years back, right? So I look at this and I think that John Schneider understands the situation he's in. And I think that because of that, he is going to do everything in his power to make sure this offseason is right. But how do you do that? In my opinion, he needs to turn the draft over to the guy who was just coaching these college kids a couple years ago, right? So let's give the majority of this back to Mike and say, hey, You know these kids better than I do. At least you saw them or maybe recruited them or whatever a couple years ago. And then, what is going to fit your scheme? But if they're going to fire Grubb, it has to be Black Monday. They've got to get rid of him immediately. If they're going to do it, it has to be immediate because they screwed around for too long and they ended up with, I hate to say leftovers because obviously Coach McDonald is great, but they waited too long last year. Black Friday, get someone new in there, get them hired right away so that they have time to see what they can do with what they have, because you have a lot of decisions. We got to decide about DK. You got to decide about Tyler. You got to decide about your running back situation. And Ken Walker, is he hurt too much? Why are we keeping Sharp? What are we doing? Are we going to trade some of these players for picks? That's a lot of decisions in about 4 weeks. So to be honest with you, it might be the best thing ever that the strength of schedule screwed us this year, because it will actually give them a little bit more time. Instead of planning for playoff games, which we all would prefer. Don't get me wrong. But you know what I'm saying? If they're going to make changes, it has to be immediate, it has to be quick, and it has to be decisive.
So speaking of those changes, one thing I want John to change is his value. And we talked about a little bit earlier, the way he handles offensive line. Like we've talked about this. And so I think this is a big caveat for him on how to keep his job going forward, is he has to do something different in that regard. And the thing when people always talk about draft and go and do that, there's a couple things I look at, and I'm going to use the Kansas City Chiefs. I know you're from there, Dayna, but I'm going to use Kansas City Chiefs for a little bit of an example. And people may not like the fact that I'm using this, but what did Kansas City do after their offensive line fell apart the year they lost the Super Bowl? They didn't rely on the draft. They went and spent money at the O-line and didn't just kind of bargain shop. They went out and got Joe Thuney. They got Orlando Brown. They went out and got guys to solve that problem. You can't rely on young guys to come in and play because they're not being developed well enough. We were talking about quarterbacks not being developed well enough in college to come in and start right away. O-line isn't either. Offensive players, really, the only receivers and running backs is still the only group that can come in and kind of make an impact initially, because the college game has changed so much to a running back, spread, passing game kind of thing. The O-line, you need to invest in the veteran guys that are above average, like Trey Smith. He comes available. John Schneider should be on that and should be in that until the final second. And if we get outbid, it's like by, just a little bit. But really, that shouldn't be the case. You need to go or trade for Wyatt Teller out of Cleveland. They need to get rid of him, or I think it's Benito that's there, the other guard. They're both in their 30s, but one of them has to come off the books this year for Cleveland for them to get over to cap positive net area. Right. Go do something like that. Go get an established upper echelon starter, even if you get one, and then you roll back Haynes or LeMaya with a new O-line coach or something. But to go out and get us another Lincoln Thomas and say, hey, look, guys, I addressed the O-line. I went and I got us a veteran O-line. Like, come on, John. Like, do your job properly and make this team better. You are still not addressing the biggest area of concern that has held your team back. I also think, on the other note about changes to the coaching staff, I honestly think Grubb is gone. I think there's just you look at the defense last year. What did we say? Hey, the defense needs to get better. It's this issue. It's not getting better. They made their change. They got rid of Pete. They got rid of that whole defensive staff. They brought in Mike McDonald. This offense was as bad as it's been in probably a decade, statistically, with Ryan Grubb. You can't turn around and be like, yeah, cool, we're going to roll it back in. Jeremy Bates got fired after year one. You can't tell me that you can't fire a coach after year one. And I get all these people saying, oh, if you're going through this carousel, you had Schottenheimer for 3 years? You had Waldron for 3? You had Bevel before that for 5 or 6 years? You had Jeremy Bates on one bookend that was a year one and year one and done. Grubb's a year one and done. And I think the guy that they're potentially going to, because you're talking about getting it done quick, I think the guy's already on the staff that they're going to make their OC, which is Jake Peets.
He talks about him constantly.
And one thing that he said that really stuck out to me that Mike McDonald said about him was, and I think it was his 710 or his Cairo news thing that he does, or his show after their game against the Bears and how they were going to get ready for that. Last guy he mentioned, and he said, this guy's really good at chasing edges, which is Mike McDonald's key term, is chasing the edge or setting the edge or whatever it is. It's something about the edge. Jake Peets. Jake Peets was great for that. He was innovative. He was on it. He was this. And I'm like, interesting. A guy that comes and everyone's so afraid of the McVay tree in Seattle now because of Waldron. Every tree has a bad apple. Like, it happens. Kevin O'Connell, Liam Cohen, Matt LaFleur, Mike LaFleur now is in the Rams. Mike McDaniel came off of McVay's tree with Shanahan in Washington. Zach Taylor in Cincinnati. Like, you kind of have more good apples than bad apples. And I've talked to people that are involved with the Rams. McVay was not happy that Jake Peets left. He was choked. He wasn't so mad when Waldron left. He could really have cared less. Jake Peets leaving really bothered McVay. I think that tells you a little bit about why, if he is anointed the starter, the guy, or the OC, I should say, he has over 15 years of NFL experience. He may not have called plays yet in the NFL, but he's been a run game, a pass game coordinator, quarterback coach, and he's called plays in college before.
I think that's a really good point. And I think the biggest thing that's going to happen, I think, is there has to be some chemistry, right, between McDonald and the new OC. I think that, and a lot of people have talked about this, not like a new idea that I came up with, but there just seems to be some very off chemistry between Grubb and coach. And so I think that that's really going to be important. So the fact that he talks about him all the time makes me too think that it's like, oh, you know what? He really likes this guy. Obviously something is clicking there between the two of them. So I think that would be really good. But again, I think it has to happen quickly and because they have a lot of decisions that they need to make pretty quickly.
Yeah. And it goes back to it's more, to me, it's like, yeah, it's a culture thing too. You got this guy from the Harbaugh tree and Mike McDonald. You got that run the football mentality, just like Pete had when he was a defensive mind. And who'd you have on the other side? It's not like the offense was just completely pass happy. You had beast mode and you ran the ball and went through him. So I agree. I think it's going to be chemistry's huge, culture, because Mike McDonald's not just the defense guy. He's the head coach now, right? And like you said, when you first came on and talked about, how is he gonna get that locker room together? How is he that's all the intangibles that a coordinator doesn't have to deal with. Now the head coach, you have to deal with, and you got to have players respond. But I want to move on to just some off-season prediction stuff. What's some of your off-season predictions now that this team's out of the playoffs? I know we touched on some. Give me a couple of quick answers, like Ryan Grubb, is he in or out? And then we'll talk about, say, a few players, especially on the offensive side. I want to get your take first on the offensive side. And you know how much I love DK Metcalf, and there's always been that side that just get him out of town since feels like day one. It really does. But and I cringe every time DK gets fired up now and he's getting into it with a player. Not because I like it, but I do too. I'm like, there's a group of fan base. They're just like, see, get him out of town, and it bugs me, right? But so, what do you think of Grubb? What do you think they're going to do in the offense with DK? What's Tyler's situation going to be? Do you see him maybe back? Because it sounds like he still wants to play football. And then the running back situation that you talked on, Ken Walker. Because listen, when you had Zach Charbonnet and Kenny Mack, it looked pretty good. And with Walker's being on the shelf a lot and just his style is that Mike Mack's style of running back that he likes. What's your take on some of those? And then just some other predictions that you might think that's going to happen this offseason.
So I think Grubb's gone too. I really do. I think that most people are in agreement with that. I think that his press conference, although he sounded confident, I don't think anyone else came out confident after that. So let me start with Tyler first. So I think that there is a chance for Tyler to come back. Obviously, the contract has to be completely redone. We're not paying Tyler Lockett $30 million. But I think that if they can get that down to a number and he's okay with the role that he played this year, that was a great quote from him. He said, what was, your biggest contribution? He said sacrifice this year. And I took that as a very humble and Tyler-esque thing to say, because he really did. He hasn't complained about not getting the catches and not getting, and all of that. And so I think he understands his situation. I don't It could be wrong because I'm all about players getting their money. If you can get more money from somebody, go get it because you need, that you deserve it. But at the same time, he's about to have a baby. He has a business in Seattle. I don't know that he wants to go trotting off to some other team for 1 year. Maybe he'll go play with Bobby in Washington. I don't know. You never know. But at the same time, I think that if they can get that number done, he'll stay. I think that he is, such a fan favorite, and it would be an easy give if the money was right. DK, I too get very frustrated with the fan base when it talks about DK because I love that DK gets mad. I love every second of it. I love the fire. And then it's like, oh, it's going to cost us 15 yards. Yes, but if this team was winning 13 games a year, you wouldn't care that he gave up those yards every once in a while. You would love that he sticks up for the people. And I will say that last one, and now I can't remember which team it was. I don't remember. Was it San Francisco? I can't remember. He got into it with that guy, and then Tyler Lockett went over to that guy.
I think that was the Bears. I think it was the Bears. That was just last game. Yeah, I remember that too.
That
teammates love him.
Yeah, and I think that he still has a place in Seattle. He is not what we thought he was going to be, but he's that big body. He can run insanely fast. And he, it takes a couple guys to get him down. Now, does he drop catches? Yeah. Does he not always make the best decisions? Sure. But I do think that he's definitely worth. Now, are we going to pay him a ridiculous amount of money? No. But I also tell you, you're not getting a first round pick for DK Metcalf. You're probably not getting a second round pick for DK Metcalf. So why not keep him at that value? Why not keep him? So I will be thrilled. Now, if they can get more than that, I might be okay. We'll see about that too. But I would like for them to keep DK. Here's the thing. I think the 3 wide receivers they have are actually pretty complementary to each other, the way that they're using them. If you actually had decent play calling, if you actually had a run game that would distract from the constant passing, if, and I know that's a lot of ifs and maybes and buts, but it's kind of true. So with the offense, again, I think Geno stays at least one more year. I think that there's going to have to be a lot of money shuffling. The Seahawks don't have a ton of space next year. I mean, they're going to need to move some things around, and they will. They will. But I don't know that you're going to see a lot of change. Where you might is Ken Walker. I think they were impressed with what they saw from Sharps and from Kenny Mack. I think that seems to, well, at least it fit the Grubb style run when he did it a little bit better. We don't know. That's why you have to get that new OC in there to find out what they want. Maybe they like more of a runner. I love Ken Walker. I love that all 3 of them are, a threat. But I think if you look at who's going to have trade value, as the way the running game went in the NFL this last year, I think it could be a running back that has some trade value. So if you're looking for some value, it could be one of those 3 guys. I really hope it's not Sharps because I actually really love the way he runs. So, and I know people get frustrated with him. I just love the way he runs. So I think that'll be the biggest for me, more than light in my head. It would make the most sense if you're going to get rid of a player for a trade value for picks and all of that. It's probably going to be a running back before a wide receiver.
So for the guys that I don't think will be back on the roster in this offseason prediction here, Dayna, I agree with you. I think there's a good chance K9 may be of trade value, and you've got McIntosh and Charbonnet who play well off each other. And the one thing I really like about Kenny McIntosh is he's quick. Like, he has some of that explosiveness that Walker, he may not have the home run ability of Ken Walker, but you don't need that when you've got JSN and DK and some of these other guys in the passing game to give you a bit of a home run threat. But I like the way he finishes runs. Like in the Chicago game, his 25-yard run, he still lowers his shoulder. And, there's that SEC mentality as a running back that I'm still going to punish you and not just run around you. And I love K9. But I find K9 a lot of the time is very indecisive and doesn't have the patience sometimes as a running back to see things and then explode through them and just get north-south. Like,
Can I tell you why I think that is? Because I don't think he trusts that line for a second.
I agree with you. Yeah, I don't think he does either.
Why. Yeah.
But it's like you saw a bit of it the second half of his rookie year. It came out a little bit that he could do it. But if he can't ever get to that again, then you're just kind of spinning your tires. And I would rather see some trade value. The other guy I don't think that will be on this roster next year is Reek Woolen. I think there's potentially on the defensive side because of you've got a guy that has all the talent in the world. Like, let's be honest. Rick Woolen is a freak athlete. He has all the talent. I don't know if the work ethic and the commitment is there, as like, everyone wanted to compare him to Sherman when he showed up. The difference with Richard Sherman and his abilities and stuff like that.
He's a dog.
He was a dog, and he was so dedicated. That Legion of Boom secondary, like, they could go out and have a fun evening within reason because they knew they had to come out and ball out the next day. Rick Woolen going out, and then he gets benched because he violates team rules this late in the year and plays absolutely horrible. It's like, okay, how do we justify paying you what Lenore got down in San Francisco, which is a very good comp of like $92 million or whatever it was? How do you justify that? And I can't win. You eventually have to pay Witherspoon, and Witherspoon is that dog type, and Josh Jobe played well opposite, and he was a guy that came off the bench. Trey Brown had his ups and downs this year. I don't know if we re-sign Trey Brown because I think he may get money somewhere else, kind of like DJ Reed. But there's no reason you couldn't bring a guy, and you did draft Nehemiah Pritchett. You could also bring in somebody else. But those are kind of the things I look at it in that regard with, the off season and with changing. And then the conversational piece that you brought up with the salary cap. I was playing with Over the Cap the other day, their cap calculator. You can make really easy money for Seattle with straight up guys we know probably won't be on this roster. You put Tyler Lockett into that category, I think is a easier bet than if he comes back. So if Tyler goes, Draymond Jones goes, George Fant, I don't think will be on this roster next year. I don't think Rayshon Jenkins will be here. I think they restructure Robertson Harris, who they brought in, who I think played really well, but I think they restructure his deal. You can get almost $50 million, and that's without touching Geno and without touching DK yet.
Noah Fant.
And Noah Fant, that's another guy.
But here's the thing. You talked about free agency offensive linemen. They are going to be very expensive over the next few years. So $50 million is going to disappear real quick if you want to go after those free agents, which I agree with you. That's what they need to do. You need to bring in the young guys too. You need to draft, but you need some of that veteran. That money's going to go really fast. And so that's when you have to shuffle. And how much are we going to have to pay Geno? And how much are you going to do this? And how much are you going to do that? So that part of it is very difficult. And yes, you just straight up cut Tyler. That's some easy money. I don't know that I trust them to put that money into the right places, I guess.
Yeah.
No, and that's a John Schneider thing. And I think that's maybe what we were talking about with him and Ryan and you both saying, like, how much his job is on the line this offseason. Like, you can't roll your theory on how to build the O-line back another year, because there's one thing that has really stuck in, not a thorn, but really stuck in my brain since Pete got let go. And it was at, I think it wasn't his press conference. It was when he did the radio interview. Finally, he did his radio interview after he had been let go. And he made the comment that people that don't know football made decisions on me leaving. And what I took that for is, and I've reached out to a few different people and they've confirmed it without confirming it, but that Burt Cold and Jody Allen really do pay attention to what Seahawks social media and
they do,
the fans and everybody say. They do take into account what people are saying and talking about. And so when the voices got really loud for Pete to be let go, because that's what Pete was kind of alluding to, was like, hey, they do listen and they may not know football the way they should, but this is kind of what happens when people who don't know football make football decisions. And that's kind of where I think for John Schneider, like, there's been a lot of noise this year about how bad, and not just from us, national media and everybody, about how bad this O-line is, how bad the play calling is. You can't roll back this same offense and be like, okay, Grubb in year 2 will be better. We give him one lineman like a Trey Smith. Oh, all of a sudden, like, his philosophical difference between Mike McDonald and Ryan Grubb is quite evident with the way they play defense to how they want to play offense. And it just doesn't work. Like, I look at what the Kansas City Chiefs have done with Patrick Mahomes. Like, they had Tyreek Hill. They shipped out the bombs away offense with that. When Spagnuolo was there, they started to build their defense, and all of a sudden they became kind of more of a ball control offense with Patrick Mahomes. And they got receivers that weren't necessarily stars, but fit the way they were going to complement their defense because there's times with the Kansas City Chiefs as of the last couple of years, you can't get them off the field. That's the problem. It's not that they're scoring 60 points and they're just go, 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 go like they were in that Rams Sunday night game or Monday night game. They're a team that's hard to get off the field, and you don't want to give them the ball because it's like, crap, are we going to get the ball back? They're just going to go down the field and they're going to score a touchdown. It's not going to be a field goal. It's going to be a touchdown. But that way it saves their defense from being exposed all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, for me too, like you look at John and that's what we are talking about. I think that you kind of said the key word, Dayna, like trust. And I've said it over a handful of times the last month or so. Like we talk about, hey, all these great ideas and plans, but wait a second, who's the guy that has to execute it? And I think that's the big question that we're going to really see. And that's why I think for me, this offseason is even going to be more intriguing than last offseason because he is the guy that's still doing it. And he has to put this together. We all talk about, oh, he's got to do this now. He's got to change things up. It's easy when it's status quo for John. But now we're expecting him to do all these things, like spend a lot of money on a guard when he blatantly came out and said, I don't do that. So I don't know what to expect. I don't know. Like you said, that's going to take a lot of money. Is he comfortable doing that? I don't know. I mean, he could go out and do the exact same thing and say, you know what, this veteran's we could plug this guy in. He's going to work out better than Lakin. And that's the scary thing to me. I don't expect a big, huge, like you said, I think you're going to see a lot of the same things. I think Geno, because of, hey, this is the safer play. I don't have anyone else. So why would I get rid of him? And I don't see huge. I think they'll draft a guy, but I don't think I'd be surprised if you see a huge splash. I want to ask you something real quick too on the defense, because I know Bryce said he thinks Woolen's gone. I also think he's gone because like I can't speak to his work ethic. I can just speak to what I see on the field. And my biggest thing is mentality. Devin Witherspoon to me, it's not a work ethic thing. That's just how he was born. He came out like that, and that's just the way it is. Some guys are dogs, some guys aren't. Reek's just not built like that. Like I've been around dudes that you got track speed. Hey, that's great, and you're tall and lanky, and you can dominate high school, college. You can get to the pros, but if you don't have that in you, does that fit Mike's mentality too? And we've seen him. I know with the game Bryce is referring to when he went out and all this kind of stuff. And like you said, I don't care if you go, if you're Legion Booming, party all night. Doesn't matter because you guys come out and ball. But who do you see on that defense? Do you think Reek's here? Who else do you see that might be not here? We talk about John's offseason free agency, something we didn't even touch on, how he didn't have a great offseason as far as free agency were concerned. So who else do you see that might see some changes? And then also to tie that in, where do you see the biggest areas of kind of attack in the draft? Not specifically players, but just positional wise, kind of tying that into both those questions kind of as one there.
Yeah. So I'm real 50-50 on Woolen. I could see where he has done enough to be traded, but I also know that he's shown enough to know the talent level. So that's going to be a Mike Macdonald question, right? Like, does he think he can do something to lock this guy in the way he was his rookie year? Because we've seen him do it, right? And what is going on with him? Is it just a work ethic thing? Is there something else going on? So I think we're 50-50. That's going to be a Mike Macdonald call of, can I fix this or can I not? And if I can't, what are you going to give me for him? And so that the price tag always has something to do with it to a certain extent. I agree. I think Draymond Jones is gone. I think that some of those other offseason additions that they got last year that didn't work out, they're going to be out. I mean, they've already done it with, players during the season. So I wouldn't be surprised if that is kind of changed over again. I do think, though, I would hope that they are already working on extending Ernest Jones. Like, let's please throw money at that, right? Like, we want that. And with as much as they talk about him, I think that they probably will make that happen. So let's hope about that. When it comes to the draft, I think that the obvious is offensive line. And yet at the same time, if they don't take an offensive lineman in the first round, I think that I will be instantly disappointed in the rest of the draft. Do you know
Yeah.
what I mean? I understand why they took Byron Murphy last year. I gotcha. And glad they did. He's been great, right? I understand why they took the defensive player, it took Witherspoon and then JSN in the first round. I get all of that, right? But has there been in the last 5+ years such a glaring, massive need as there has been as the line? And so taking, even if it's a reach, where it was sitting probably 18 or 19, I think even if we win on Sunday, it literally only moves one number one way or the other, right? It's like 17, 18, 18, 19, whatever. Even if you don't think that kid should go until the top of the second round, but you're going to take him because I want you to reach for that player. I want you to go get the best offensive lineman that is left in the draft where you're sitting right now. If they don't, I don't know how I will feel about the rest of the draft. I think that is the elephant literally in the room. Other areas, I think that you can always throw another wide receiver in there, although I think I read that this is not a great year for wide receivers. So maybe that's just something you do in the later rounds. You can never have enough defensive linemen, depth, right? Like you always want as much depth as possible. But I, honest to God, the only thing I care about, I'm completely tunnel visioned, is on the line. And so the offensive line, I think that is the make or break of this draft.
Yeah, no, I agree, Dana. I think they need to, like we said, get a veteran and then draft somebody, whether that's Booker, whether that's one of these guys that is like you can plug and play him. Not to say Christian Haynes, isn't maybe going to turn around, maybe with a new coach and a new scheme, he might be better suited for it. Who knows? But you can't roll a 3rd-round pick that failed the first year and a 6th-round pick back out there, and Anthony Bradford, who we know doesn't really work because he's just like a younger, in my opinion, Lincoln Tomlinson without, obviously the injuries problems lately. But the one thing for me is I agree, you have to take a line first. The one other position for me that I think they could really actually go after, and this is where with John, I always wonder, we talk about, can you trust John Schneider, is if, say, we're at 18 and a guy like Tyler Warren's there, the Penn State tight end. And
really? Okay.
The reason I say that is he missed out on Kittle.
Yeah.
Which he really missed Kittle.
I can't stand George Kittle, but yeah, that was a miss.
That was a big miss.
I can't either.
Just say you do get Jake Peets in here as the new OC, and he comes from McVay. They like their 2 tight ends. I don't think Noah Fant fits. I think that's been proven. He hasn't scored a touchdown since 2022. Maybe he scored one this weekend, but that's still not good enough. AJ Barner, I think in some respects has surpassed him, and he's still a guy that's got a lot of development.
Yep.
Farrell Brown was a bust. Brady Russell's been hurt all year. Your tight end room's actually kind of depleted in a lot of ways. I could see if that guy's there from Penn State, you talk about, if we miss out on Tyler, it's not a great receiver draft, but you go get like that type of impact tight end that will give you that 3rd option. And, you can go to 2 tight ends and you can help out with the pass blocking that way and get an all around impact tight end like that. That's the only one I could see where if he's sitting there and it's him and maybe Booker's already off the board or one of these other guys, John, and they have addressed, I'll say this, the caveat, they have addressed some of the O-line issues properly in free agency. That they could take a swing at getting a difference maker tight end like that with a guy that may know how to use him properly, give Geno that big 6'6", 250-pound target down the middle of the field, which he hasn't had really.
Right. I love how we all say, if they have done this,
If they've addressed it. That's
God,
the
we
only
just have all these
caveat.
little caveats. I've heard other people too say, that we really still don't have like the killer, edge rusher, that maybe is if you find one you like in this draft, that would be a good one to pick up too. I think it's always smart to have depth. And so if there's a really good player, let's say in the 2nd or 3rd round, even though we have, Leo sitting there, you want some depth. I get that, but you have to address these glaring needs first. I hadn't thought about tight end, to be honest with you. I don't think about tight ends a lot. I guess I probably should, but that's a really good point. But they have to have done something else first. They really do.
Agreed.
Yeah, yeah. I just think I like what Bryce is saying too, because it's
Mhm.
like, and I agree with you. Like, if there's a stud there, you take him. But I really think that I just think I want to wake up to John Schneider and the Seahawks sign a big money deal to a veteran guard, because I think that's where your quickest fix
Mhm.
is going to be, because plugging a rookie in there, and like we said, the Seahawks got one of the youngest, if not the youngest, offensive line. So to just plug another young guy in and think
Right.
like this is going to do it, I think you're going to go through more growing pains instead of you
Mhm.
have that solid vet, just under that Pro Bowl level guy that we
Mhm.
talked about, that can then help other guys along as well. We talk about, John did take a guy in Charles Cross in the first
Mhm.
round early, and he's had his ups and downs. And people
But he's
talk
been
about
pretty solid. I mean, he's
he's
not like a
he's
superstar, but yeah.
well, and that's and
Yeah.
and they probably will, but he's a guy you're gonna have to extend to
Mhm.
some good money. But again, if he had that veteran there, that
Yeah.
a good player
Agreed.
elevates his game as well. And especially when Lucas came back, now he's drawing a little more attention, right? Because before,
Mhm.
you're putting your guy on Stone or Jarrell or whoever else was over there. So
Everybody.
that'll be interesting. I think you got to do both.
Mhm.
But yeah, it's just, I don't know. It's just gonna be interesting to see. It's just, man, do we believe in John Schneider? That's the ultimate question. I think all of us and a lot of Seahawk fans are going to this offseason thinking, because it's great to sit here and map it out for him. But will he, he's an old dog, right? Like,
Right.
teaching him new tricks. Really, when you think about it, I mean, he's
Yeah.
been here for a long time.
Yeah.
So honestly, to expect him to just, maybe he feels like his job is fine too. I mean, maybe he's had different conversations with ownership. I don't know. I think
Yeah.
they are going to have some conversations, but I just don't. I'm waiting and see it
Mhm.
to see what happens. My expectations are just wait and see approach.
And I think it'll be interesting to see how much they always talked about, he and Pete did the draft together. I want to see how
Right.
much movement and how much influence Mike has on this draft too. That let's hope there's quite a bit.
Yeah, and with offseason free agency as well.
Oh God.
But the nice thing is you saw it right in the middle of the season with the
Yeah.
linebackers. Like, it's like, hey,
Like do
get
that.
me two guys. You got to get rid of these two dudes. They're not
Mhm.
fitting this scheme at all. And boom, Ernest Jones in the door, Tyrese Knight coming along. So that gives you signs that there's some influence there already.
Yeah. Yeah. Those were great.
So with that being said, now that we've done this whole massive kind of outlook of the off season that will happen after Sunday's game, let's preview the Seahawks season finale
Mm.
for 2025. Dana, what are you looking for in this game versus the Rams? Are there some things or players you'd like to see play a little bit more than maybe they have prior? And how do you think the game goes, even though we know the Rams are playing their backups?
Um, Truly what I've been saying, all I want from this game is for them to come out and treat it like it still mattered. I want them to come out. I want them to play hard. I want them to go 4-2 in the division. I want them to get to 10 wins. I want them to end on an up note. They already know the season's over. Doesn't matter. So how are we going to make the best of the situation we're in? We're going to have double-digit wins and we're going to go 4-2 in the division. That's how. That's how we're going to make our stamp. I think that would be the best jumping off point going into next season. I want to see that. I want to see the defense wreak, havoc with Jimmy Garoppolo, which will be very strange to see. And I want to see them dominate backups like they should. I already know Abe Lucas has already been declared he's not going to play. And so there's obviously going to be some players. And hopefully if they get I say hopefully if they get a lead. I'm not super confident in this game, but hopefully if they get a lead, they'll sit some of these other guys. But if this is Tyler's last game in a Seahawks jersey, I want him to play a lot.
Right.
I want this offense to go out, not embarrassed, right? Like that's all I want. I just want them to go out and play like this game still matters to them. I think we will know a lot about this team by how they do play this game. If they come out, it's laissez-faire and they know it doesn't matter, that's not going to sit well with me the entire offseason. If they come out and fight, I think I'll be much more optimistic about next year.
Yeah, do you got a score for us?
I've been saying 23-14. I think Seattle wins. I still don't think it's super high scoring. 23 would be great. I don't even know that they
That'd
get
be
to
high
20.
scoring for us.
Yeah,
as
it
of
would
late.
be. I would even be fine with 20 points. You know what I mean? But against backups, I would just against backups, I'm hoping that they can do that. I don't know. Obviously, LA couldn't care less. But it was an interesting point that was brought up to me yesterday was sometimes backups play harder because they are trying to get a job. And I was like, oh, yeah. And then we'll lose because I have no faith in
And
this offense at all.
we've seen backups come in our house and just shred us.
Exactly.
Sam Howell played pretty good. And
Yeah,
what's the other?
right?
It's just there's been a few guys, especially in the
Yeah.
Pete era there. But Bryce, what's your outlook on this game?
I want to see the defense finish the way they've been playing. I would like to
Mm-hmm.
see the defense, like, again, you're playing backups. I want to see this defense dominate. Yes, you're missing Josh Jobe, but Trey Brown should be able to come in,
Mm-hmm.
play well. I would, the one other thing outside of the D-line on defense for me that's been a really big bright spot this year and something that I'm going to keep cashing my checks on and my receipts on is Kobe Bryant. I have loved Kobe Bryant since the day we drafted him, and I said when we drafted him, he needed to be a safety. That's what fit him. And finally, we get a coach that understands that and puts him there and gives him the opportunity outside of Rayshon Jenkins' injury. And man, do him and Julian Love look like a very good young safety tandem for us. And so, to see those two play well again, I want to see Nehemiah Pritchett play. And maybe the Josh Jobe injury will allow that. We drafted him. He's been a healthy scratch. Let him get some run. Ryan, as you and me know, I want to see Kenny Mack and Charbonnet do their thing.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I want Geno to end on a high note.
Mm-hmm.
I want Geno to go out and maybe have like a Cardinals game again where he was just dealing and the offense worked. The one thing that does scare me, though, is that if the offense does have some explosion, does that save Ryan Grubb's freaking job? And I know, and I agree,
so.
Dayna, but it's again, we talk about the John Schneider factor and all of this, and he has final say over the staff now. That's part of his new title, right? Is he got that? Like, does John somehow get cold feet over that and go, yeah, but look at that Rams game? And it's like, yeah, but you were playing backups. You weren't playing, Verse and Fisk and all these young stars that the Rams are developing again. So I think prediction score for me, I think 2013 Seattle. I think that's where it kind of goes for this game.
Yeah, I got him. I agree. I want to see the defense just absolutely dominate, like just like they've been doing, right? I mean, you're playing Jimmy G. He hasn't played all year, right? Has he played a game? He hasn't played all year, has he? So he hasn't played all year. And this defense we think is for real. So I think they are gonna. I think it's gonna be a lower scoring game. It's tough to say, but I'm with Bryce, man. I know what you're saying. Like, no, it shouldn't save his job. But we've seen crazy things, man. I even think back to like the Buffalo Bills when they sat Doug Flutie the last game of this season and to put in Rob Johnson, a meaningless game. And what does the owner do? He tells the coach, you're starting Rob because he balled out in a meaningless game. And it made no sense. So that kind of stuff kind of scares you. I think didn't Matt Flynn play a meaningless game
against the
just
Detroit Lions
balled out
$26 million.
5 or 6 TDs? And then we give him a big contract and he doesn't see the field, right? Because we draft Russ. So I know what you're saying, but like to Bryce's point, John could be sitting up in the booth, be like, see, he's still got it. He's my guy. We're
worrying Dayna now.
No, listen, let me tell you this.
Right?
Yeah, let me tell you that this proves for Seahawks fans. Because it's like we think way too deep into this stuff. It's like, oh, he won't be back. Blah, blah, blah. He's been a mess. But remember that time?
I just think there's some truth to that. And then even if you win 10, it looks better than 9. And look, I want this team to come out and fight ball. That's what I want to see. I want to see him compete ball. Defense plays hard. I'm not really concerned, honestly, who wins the game. I think that as long as, like you said, Dan, if they show fight, and you can tell if a team's quit and when a team's there to fight. So that's really all I'm looking for. I
Yep.
just want to see them fight. It's really hard to call it because they put up 6 points against the Bears. I don't have a lot of hope for this offense. The Bears are a complete disaster. I think they're more of a disaster than the Jets. So I don't
Who
expect
were
much from
beating
this
us
offense.
for most of that game.
Yeah, so I'm gonna throw out 16-13 Rams. That's what I got, 16-13 Rams.
So
So I'll just say this, and I got a pick six spoon.
okay.
What
Okay.
we
I would
think
love that.
Reek?
You know, that's my favorite.
Think I was
playing
gonna say
football.
Reek?
I was worried.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, because that means he's back, right? So I think I got six because I think I said a couple times where I predicted a pick six for Spoon, and it didn't happen. So
Yeah.
I think he gets it here.
It's my favorite playing football. Pick
So
six.
Dana, I got one other question since the Seahawks won't be in the playoffs this year.
Okay.
What is your ideal Super Bowl matchup? Who do you want to see in the Super Bowl this year?
Lions, Ravens.
Lions, Ravens.
Nice.
Okay.
Yep. Nothing against the Bills. I would be thrilled if it's Lions
That'd be
Bills.
fun.
That would be great because I'd be like, I don't care who wins. I'm happy for both these fan bases,
Right,
right?
right.
I would feel the same about Ravens too. I truly think Lamar Jackson does not get the credit that he deserves for what he does. I know
sure.
he gets talked about a lot, but I just think it's different. I think he's held to kind of a different standard. It's a whole thing with me. But and so I would love that for them. But really, Bills or Ravens and the Lions. And I know the Lions are, having problems with their defense and all this other stuff, but I am so excited for Sunday Night Football. I haven't been excited for Sunday Night Football pretty much all year, but this Vikings-Lions game is just, I think you're getting a preview who's going to the Super Bowl.
So Ryan, who do you want to see?
I like that Lions call. I do because I felt like they should have beat San Fran last year. I thought so. I got Lions, and I got I hate to say it.
Don't say it.
The Chiefs.
I don't think the Chiefs.
I don't want to see them. I just think there's going to be some way they're going to make it. But I'd love to see. I'd love to see that Ravens Lions matchup. But I think I could see Lions. And but who I want to see actually is coming out of the NFC is Green Bay. And I'm not a Green Bay fan, but I like Jordan Love. I like that young core of receivers and the running back there and what they do. And so and I think they're in the mix. So I want to see Green Bay. So I actually will say what I want to see is Packers Ravens.
Oh, that'd be a good game.
Yeah, Bryce.
Okay, so for me, I'm gonna defer a little bit from both of you. I really liked Detroit and what they've done and Jared Goff and Dan Campbell's story and everything, but I think they're really beat up. And
They
I
are.
think that is going to come back to bite them a little bit. I'm going to have to say of the NFC, I'd love to see the Vikings. Kevin O'Connell, Sam Darnold.
Be crazy.
That would be kind of the Kurt Warner in a way, kind of goes to his new team, takes him to the Super Bowl a little bit. I know Kurt Warner was a rookie. It's a little bit different, but someone that's kind of had the renaissance to their career, for say. It also makes the Vikings offseason that much more interesting because what do they do with their money? That's another part of it. And then for me, I'm a huge Josh Allen guy.
Yeah.
I've been a fan of him since he was at Wyoming. Ryan knows this. Like, I would sell the farm to get Josh Allen in Seattle. But I'd love to see Buffalo and the Vikings because either way, somebody that wins that's going to win their first Super Bowl. And we're talking about teams that have lost multiple Super Bowls.
Yeah.
Buffalo versus the Vikings, I think, would be really interesting to see that shootout because you'd have a defense in Brian Flores that would have to play against that offense and what Josh Allen can do. And you'd have Bills defense that's okay, having to figure out a way again to stop Justin Jefferson, which they struggled the last time they played each other when Justin Jefferson made that miraculous catch. So that's the Super Bowl I want to see, and the one that I'm banking on happening is Vikings versus Bills.
Yeah. It would be interesting. I mean, it would be different too, right? It would get rid of the retread. And I'm not trying to be mean to the Chiefs. I just don't think that they have it this year. Although Patrick Mahomes getting snubbed for the Pro Bowl might put a fire under him a little bit.
Don't get me started on the Pro Bowl,
yeah.
Dana.
Oh, I know. Don't me neither.
Yeah,
but
I
think that the country is ready for new. I think that that'll.
Oh yeah. Let's hope so. Dana, we really appreciate you coming on, hanging out. Awesome conversation again. We just love having you on the show. before we get you out of here, why don't you let everybody watching the channel here know how to find you and all your work, what you got, what do you got coming up next on your show as well?
Oh gosh. So we've been on a 2-week hiatus because our shows are on Tuesdays, which was Christmas Eve and New Year's Eve. So that was hard for us. So and so we've been on a couple week hiatus, but Our Turf Football, we're every Tuesday, 8 p.m. Eastern time. And I'm not on next week, but they're going to start kind of doing these, we do this thing where we take the playoff games and we try and do the pros and cons of each team winning and how that seeding will be. It'll be really interesting. They've been real busy over there. Also, we have a college show on Wednesday nights, and they've been very busy with the playoffs. So please tune in for that. It's the After Football podcast college show, and that's on Wednesday nights at 8:00 on Eastern time. And then, of course, randomly, I'm on Real Hawk Talk with those Hawk Blogger boys. We just did a show last night. But we're excited because we have, for Our Turf, Lisa's going to go to the Senior Bowl. So we'll be covering all the things at the Senior Bowl. And then I think the next event I'm doing is I'll be at the Combine this year. So that'll be really interesting and fun. So yeah, the off season doesn't slow down a ton for us, even if Seattle's not playing. So.
No, exactly. Guys, go down, sub to Dayna's stuff. Links will be in the description as well. So Dayna, awesome having you on. We appreciate it again, and I'm sure we will talk to you in the future here.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks Dayna.
Bye.
Guys, that was Dayna O'Gorman joining us again on the show. Yeah, she's becoming a regular guest. Awesome having her on. Awesome talk, insight. Just, we touched on a lot of things. Yeah, a lot of things aligned that what we've been talking about, especially with Schneider. She thinks Grubb's gone. And the biggest thing is too, that the latter half of the show there was, when we all started talking about, do you believe that John's a guy that can get it done? And that's the big question. Now, if a lot of us are thinking that, our owners thinking the same thing, and that's going to be the interesting thing in the offseason. That's why I think this is just going to be so microscopic for John now, that every move he's making, because do we still believe in John Schneider?
Yeah, and that's the big question. Do we believe in John? Do we think he can right this ship? Does one off season now that he'll fully have with Mike Macdonald really help get their vision together of how this team needs to be for Mike Macdonald to be successful? And the defense, you don't have to do much. You can add pieces to the defense. You're not retooling or rebuilding this defense this offseason. You're truly just adding pieces to it and keeping it going in that same direction. The offense is another story. And that's going to be the big, big task for Mike Macdonald and John Schneider and whoever the offensive coordinator ends up being, if it is Ryan Grubb again, which we all think it won't be, but if that's Jake Peets or somebody they bring in, they got to do it quick, and they got to address the areas of concern really quick and make a decision on what this future looks like, and make a decision on the future of the quarterback position. That's the other part. The O-line we can talk about, but we got to also figure out who that O-line is going to block for the next, not 2 years, but the next 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, a lot of things he's got to get worked out. So we'll see. It's gonna be interesting. This offseason is starting really, really quickly here. Black Monday coming up quick. Anyways, guys, go down, sub to Dayna's stuff, and make sure you go down and sub to our channel too. Appreciate everybody that's viewing in, but make sure you go down and hit the subscribe button for us too. Really helps out the channel a lot. So that's it for us. Coming up, our next show, we are going live post game with Dan Beans after the Rams game, but that's going to be our last post-game show of the season. So don't miss that. Hit the notification button so you know when we are going live with that one. And then the following day, we're going live with Brandon Kane as well. So we got some good stuff coming up. Make sure you guys don't miss out on that. So that's it for us. Go Hawks.
Go Hawks.